Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I've always made a solemn swear that if we ever get an interesting basketball story, that we'll go ahead and discuss it here on the Aaron Torres pod, even if it's September, October, football season, whatever. Well, we certainly got one on Wednesday morning, and this was crazy. I woke up to this story. Arnie Spanier from Fox Sports actually sent me the story. But so Dan Hurley, later this month, first of all, Dan Hurley, I think if you're listening to this, you know who he is, two-time national champion, UConn Huskies, whatever, okay? So Dan Hurley, later this month, has a book coming out. And I think it's one of those leadership books and things of that nature, whatever, written with Ian O'Connor, famous author, famous writer, famous columnist, whatever. Well, I bring it up because with a month out until the book comes out, anyone who's ever written a book or knows about how the process works, you start releasing excerpts to different media outlets. The kind of hope is that, hey, maybe you put out something interesting, you create interest in the book, and hopefully once the book comes out, you sell a lot of copies, pre-orders, whatever. Well, I bring it up because there was certainly an interesting quote that dropped on Wednesday, came across my feed, and that quote was that apparently Dan Hurley was considering retirement after last season. Was it fact? Was it fiction? We'll discuss it in a minute. But producer Matt, you have the quotes. Now, to be clear, I don't normally share stuff. These quotes were shared with The Athletic. You know my policy. I don't share stuff behind a paywall, but this is from a book. It's clear that Dan Hurley wants these quotes out. It's clear that the publisher wants these quotes out. It's clear that Ian O'Connor wants these quotes out. And if you don't believe me, Dan Hurley literally released some of these quotes on his social media pages, so I don't feel so bad talking about it. But here is what Dan Hurley had to say about last season and the thought of retirement. Go ahead, pop it up, Matt. He said, quote, "I knew in my mind," this is after last season, "I knew in my body and I could just feel that I was completely cooked." This is from his book, just burnt. "I didn't even know how I was standing. I stared at the office walls, muttering, conducting a brutal review of our season. I didn't build a strong enough roster. I wasn't a good leader. I let everybody down in Maui. I lost control emotionally at various points. I came in here some days sad and defeated when I needed to be positive and inspiring." He continues, "Then I went through the self-lacerating what if. What if we played a little bit better in Maui? What if we hadn't blown that game against Seton Hall? What if we'd been a better seed than an 8 seed and hadn't had to face the number 1 team in the country in the second round? Who knows?" He continued. This is where it gets interesting. "It was unhealthy to be ruminating in this way. I was unhealthy. I desperately needed to get out of town, flee to my standard hideaway, Dorado Beach in San Juan. I needed to do some healing, not think about basketball for a few days, but that wasn't possible in this new era. The transfer portal and NIL deals made every college basketball player a free agent. So right after the tournament, I needed to be in my office in stores. If I left town right then, I wouldn't have had a team for the 2025-2026 season." And here's the money quote. "At that point, I wasn't even sure that I would return for the 2025-2026 season." All right, a lot to dive into. Dan Hurley telling in his book that he considered retirement after last season. I will quickly share my thoughts, and I'll start by saying this. Do I believe that in his weakest moments, Dan Hurley questioned whether he was good enough to be doing this job? I do. Do I believe in his weakest moments he said, maybe I shouldn't be doing this job, maybe somebody could do it better? I do. Do I believe that Dan Hurley ever seriously considered not coaching the UConn Huskies in 2025-2026? Yeah, I do not. And I don't want to say this is all PR because I think Dan Hurley clearly went through a lot last season. I think it was a stressful season for him and everybody associated with him. But no, I don't think that Dan Hurley ever seriously considered retirement. Okay, so first of all, let me say this. Listen, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm not accusing anybody of lying. By the way, thank you, Matt. Make sure to follow our Torres on UConn page, Torres on UConn, for all your late-breaking UConn news. So first of all, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. But let's also remember, he is trying to sell a book. Ian O'Connor is trying to sell a book. The publisher is trying to sell a book. And so, again, They are going to put out the most salacious quote that they possibly can, because at the end of the day, that is what is going to help them sell books. At the same time, do I actually believe that he was really going to leave UConn to take another job? I'm sorry, I just don't. Okay. The bottom line is this. First of all, a couple things here. One, Dan, again, it's what I said a minute ago. Dan Hurley is a crazy high achieving person. Okay. Dan Hurley is someone that is a perfectionist that holds himself to an even higher standard than everybody around him. And as someone who has been in a Dan Hurley practice, I can promise you he holds everybody to an incredibly high standard. So when he feels like he's letting people down, I think he had what they call in psychological terms, they call it imposter syndrome. For people who don't know, don't whatever, imposter syndrome is basically like where you question, am I good enough to be doing this? You could question it in your job. You could question it as a parent. You could question it as whatever, as a mother, as a father, as a son, as a husband, as a wife, whatever. And so do I think there was some imposter syndrome creeping in? I do. Do I think that there were times where he was like, I'm not good enough? I do. You know how I know? Because I think I'm pretty highly strung too. I think I'm a little bit of a perfectionist too. And I think that at times I could be the exact same way. I could sit there and look at myself in the mirror and say, Torres, you're not good enough. Torres, you suck. Torres, that show sucked. Whatever. And so this notion that he didn't at any moment in time have those thoughts, of course we all do. Everybody does, especially high-performing people. And what I would also say with Dan Hurley, what I think made it especially tough was how tough last season was. And I think specifically with him, specifically with the way he's wired, and specifically, oh, by the way, remember that this is a guy that for 2 years basically had the answers to the test, right? Back-to-back national championships. It's easy to forget 2 straight national championships in which his teams, how about this? They won every single game by double figures. When you're that dominant for that long, you think you have all the answers. And I will say, I think Dan Hurley struggled last year. He said it in the 60 Minutes interview. He said, for a while, I was judging myself by if I don't win the national championship, I'm a failure. And he talked to, I believe it was Gino Auriemma, Tom Izzo, a couple others that were like, if that's how you're going to carry yourself the rest of your career, good luck, because that is an impossible standard to live up to. So I think in his weakest moments, it was probably something that he thought about. But do I believe he ever actually considered retirement? I'm sorry, I don't. Now, long term, is he at UConn for the next 30 years? I think that might be a little bit tough. I think the way that he is wired, he's full speed ahead. I think he's physically and mentally drained by the end of the year. And, I think the job is, he takes it very seriously. So I don't really have much more to add. I thought it was an interesting story, but do I think he ever actually considered retirement? I don't. By the way, I'll say this. If anything, I think he wanted to put together the best freaking roster that he possibly could, because that guy is a stud, just an absolute monster.